In this video, we're going to be talking about rewriting proportions. Sometimes this can make doing calculations a little bit easier. Let's say that you know A over B equals C over D, that this is a proportion that you've been able to write looking at a diagram of, for instance, similar triangles, that this is a true proportion. And what we're going to say is that if this is true, if this proportion as we're looking at it now is true, there's ways that you can rewrite it which will also be true. So let's just look at this. We know that if A is to B as C is to D, then we can also say A is to C as B is to D, which is how we've written this. We're saying A is to C as B is to D. That's another way that we can write this proportion. Now, of course, we can also say if A is to B as C is to D, if this is a true statement, then we can flip both of them upside down and say B is to A as D is to C. So as we can see, we can rewrite this so that these fractions are just turned upside down, where we haven't changed the proportion. This is just another way that we can rewrite this basic information. And one more way that we can write this, we can say that A over B equals C over D allows us to say also that C over A equals D over B. C over A equals D over B. Or, if we're looking at this proportion that we've written, we can just flip this fraction upside down and this fraction as well, and we're looking at C over A equals D over B. Now the key point in all of this is that we know all of these proportions are equal because the cross products are equal, meaning this. In this, we've got A times D, AD equals B times C. And as you can see, we haven't changed that. In any of these diagrams, we are still getting that same cross product. And this cross product, that A times D equals B times C, is also a way of rewriting this proportion. So we really need to include this as a way of rewriting an initial proportion. Again, our assumption here is that from a diagram you can see that A is to B as C is to D, and that you can rewrite that basic proportion 4 or 5 different ways. This is the way that we usually rewrite proportions so that we can find an answer. But let me just kind of show you a couple of other ideas that you can think about. Let's say we're solving a trig problem, and we've gotten this far. We're saying the sine of 20 degrees equals x over 7. And we've talked about completing this as a proportion so that we can use our cross products. And in this situation, we have x times 1, which gets the variable by itself, equals 7 times the sine of 20 degrees. Which then gives us x equals 2.39, which we would probably round to 2.4. It's nice when you do the cross products, you get the variable by itself, or you're multiplying x times 1, getting the variable by itself. Let's say, on the other hand, if you start out with an equation like this, that the sine of 50 degrees equals 7 over x, when you set things up to do your cross multiplication, you get 7 times 1 equals the sine of 50 times x. The x is not by itself. So we're going to stop for a second and look at this to see if there's a way of rewriting this proportion so that the variable is by itself. And again, it's perfectly all right to say, well, the sine of 50 degrees times x equals 7 times 1, and then, eventually get the variable by itself. However, just by rewriting this proportion as x is to 1, as 7 is to sine of 50 degrees, that gets the variable by itself instantly. And now I'm pretty sure that I'm doing this division instead of multiplication to get my answer. 7 divided by the sine of 50 degrees gives us 9.14 as an answer. So doing this gives us this. Let's go back and see. Again, it would just be a little bit more difficult with this process. Sine of 50 degrees times x equals 7 times 1. Well, I guess we could say right at the start here that we're going to be dividing to get the x by itself. So again, to get the x, we know, even doing this step, that we're doing this division. However, I think it's a little bit easier and a little bit more elegant that when you have a situation like this, that you look, if you're not going to get the variable by itself when you do your cross products, why not just rewrite the proportion so that you get the variable by itself? X divided by 1 is x, x times 1 is x. So there's a couple of different ways you can approach these trig ratios when you get them in a problem by rewriting the proportion.